Find your own place, Lucy. There's simply no room for you here anymore. My daughter Cindy's words still rang in my ears like a death knell as I packed my final suitcase in the master suite of my new home. 3 weeks had passed since that public humiliation. Story continues as written above. It's not evicting you, Mom, Cindy responded with that condescending tone she used to explain obvious things to Kelly when she was little. It's a natural transition. Think about it. You won't have to worry about maintaining such a big property, paying such high utilities, or cooking for so many people. You could have a cozy little place where you only have to take care of yourself. George nodded enthusiastically, as if he was selling the idea of the century. Exactly. And we could take care of the house, take on the responsibilities that have been a burden for you for years. It would be like retiring from household worries. The irony was suffocating. They would take care of the responsibilities that had been my burden. But of course, they didn't mention how they would fund those responsibilities without my income. In their fantasy world, the house would maintain itself by magic once I disappeared from the picture. And how are you planning to pay the mortgage? I asked, feeling a strange calm descending over me. The utilities, the groceries, the expenses I currently cover with my work. An uncomfortable silence spread across the table. Glances were exchanged as if it were a trick question they hadn't considered in their brilliant plan. Michael cleared his throat. Well, Mom, we'd obviously have to make some financial adjustments. Maybe everyone could contribute a little more, be more independent. Contribute a little more. I repeated, feeling the calm transform into something more dangerous. Michael, you haven't contributed financially to this house in 5 years. Your last contribution was losing $60,000 of my money in a coffee shop you turned into your personal bar. That's not fair, he protested with teenage indignation. That business would have worked if I'd had more family support, if there hadn't been so much negativity. Negativity. The word came out of my mouth like a roar. You call the fact that I worked like a slave for 2 years to pay off the debts of your business failure negativity? Cindy quickly intervened, trying to calm the situation that was spiraling out of control. Mom, we don't need to rehash past mistakes. We're talking about the future, about what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone? I stood up from the table, feeling 70 years of pent-up frustration begin to boil in my chest. You know what would be best for everyone? For you to take responsibility for your own lives for once. Kelly, who had been silent throughout the exchange, decided to contribute her teenage perspective. Grandma, I don't understand why you're so mad. We're just suggesting that you have your own space. My friends think it's weird that you live with the whole family at your age. At my age. As if 70 was synonymous with a social nuisance that needed to be hidden to maintain the appearance of family normalcy. And where exactly do you suggest I find this own place? I asked, looking at each face around the table. With what money, after I spent my savings, Roberto's inheritance, and mortgaged my house to fund your whims and failures? George shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Lucy, I'm sure that with your pension and maybe a part-time job, you could afford a small apartment. You don't need anything extravagant. My pension, which currently goes entirely to paying the mortgage I took out for your brother-in-law's failed business, I reminded him, my voice getting louder. My part-time job, which is really 12 hours a day, because at 70 I have to support 8 parasitic adults. Hey, Charles protested, finally participating in the conversation. You have no right to insult us. We're family. We've been here because you invited us. I invited you temporarily. I screamed, completely losing my composure. Temporarily. Elaine, you came 15 years ago for 6 months after your divorce. Charles, we gave you the guest room until you got back on your feet 12 years ago. Cindy and George, you were only going to stay until you saved for your own place after the wedding, and that was 25 years ago. Elaine stood up indignantly. Lucy, I don't know what's wrong with you lately, but this hostile attitude isn't like you. Roberto would be ashamed to see you treating family like this. The mention of Roberto as an emotional weapon was the final straw. Something broke irreparably inside me, like a dam collapsing after decades of holding back an overflowing reservoir. "Don't you dare mention Roberto!" I roared with a fury I didn't know I possessed. Roberto worked himself to death supporting this family. Roberto died of stress at 58 because he couldn't handle the financial pressure of supporting so many irresponsible adults. And you have the audacity to use his memory to justify continuing to be parasites. The silence that followed was different from the previous one. It was a silence of shock, of boundaries crossed, of painful truths finally said out loud. They all looked at me as if I had become a dangerous stranger, as if the submissive and generous grandmother had been possessed by a vengeful demon. "Okay," George said after a few moments, his voice controlled but tense. "I think we all need to calm down and think things through with a clear head. Maybe this conversation got out of control." "No," I interrupted him with a firmness that surprised even myself. "This conversation needed to happen 20 years ago. You want me to leave my house, to find my own place, to let you live comfortably in the property that I pay for, that I maintain, that I finance with my work." I walked slowly around the table, looking at each face as if I was seeing them for the first time in my life. "Cindy, you asked me to fund your wedding, your honeymoon, Kelly's quinceañera, your beauty treatments, your designer clothes, and now you want me to fund a $2,500 spa trip for your daughter while you evict me from my own house." Cindy looked down, unable to meet my eyes. "George, you have lived here for free for 25 years. You turned my garage into your personal office. You have never paid a dime in utilities. And now you're telling me to look for my own place because there's no room for me here anymore." George stared intently at his bowl of dumplings as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "Michael, my son, I have given you money for all your failed projects. I mortgaged the house for your disastrous coffee shop, and now you want $50,000 more for another business venture while you suggest I leave so you can have more space." Michael shrank in his chair like a scolded child. "Kelly, my dear granddaughter, I have paid for your private education, your brand-name clothes, your outings with friends, your teenage whims, and now you think it's weird that I live in my own house." Kelly didn't look up from her phone. "Elaine, Charles, you have lived as permanent guests for more than a decade without contributing financially, and now you're telling me I'm selfish because I'm finally questioning this untenable situation." I finished my circuit back at my place at the table, but I didn't sit down. I stood there, feeling a strange energy running through my veins, something I hadn't felt in decades. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice sounding different, stronger, more confident. "It's time for me to find my own place. But not in the way you imagine." That night, after everyone had retreated to their respective rooms with a tense atmosphere hanging throughout the house, I sat on my marital bed and dialed Oscar's number. It was 11 o'clock at night, but I needed to talk to someone who would understand my situation without judging me for years of decisions that now seemed obviously wrong. "Miss Brooks, what a surprise to hear from you so late," Oscar replied in a professional but kind voice. "Is everything all right?" "Oscar, I want to sell the house," I told him without preamble. "As fast as possible. That developer you mentioned, the one who pays cash, is he still interested?" There was a brief pause. "Of course. In fact, I was in touch with him this week about another property, and he specifically mentioned that your house is still his first choice. If I may ask, what motivated you to make this decision?" "Let's just say my family helped me see things more clearly," I replied with bitter irony. "How long would we need to close the sale?" "If all goes well, we could have signed contracts in a week and closed the deal in 3 weeks at most. The developer has pre-approved financing and is eager to start his project." The efficiency in Oscar's voice was reassuring. "Do you need help finding a new property? I know several luxury condos that might interest you." "I'm actually considering options outside of the country," I told him, surprising even myself with the firmness of my decision. "Something completely different." After hanging up with Oscar, I sat down in front of my laptop and started researching something that had been a secret fantasy of mine for years, living in Europe. Roberto and I had dreamed of traveling to Spain and Italy when we retired, but his untimely death had buried those plans along with so many other dreams. For the next few hours, I browsed real estate websites in Monaco, Spain, Portugal, and Italy. The prices pleasantly surprised me. With a little over $800,000, I could buy a spectacular apartment with a view of the Mediterranean Sea, something unthinkable in my hometown. Monaco especially called to me. Small, safe, elegant, perfect for a woman my age who wanted peace and dignity. I found a penthouse in Monte Carlo that took my breath away. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a huge terrace with a panoramic view of the harbor, a building with 24-hour security, a gym, a spa, and concierge service. The price was $850,000. It would be tight, but feasible if I sold the house for a good price and managed my remaining money well. The next few days were a quiet planning period. Every morning I had breakfast with my family as if nothing had changed. I listened to their usual complaints, responded to their requests for money with diplomatic evasions, and smiled when they asked me if I had thought about their suggestion to move out. But in the afternoons, while they went about their routine activities, I was busy organizing my escape. I contacted the real estate agent in Monaco who confirmed that the penthouse was still available and that the transaction could be handled completely remotely. I researched the residency requirements for American citizens in Monaco. With sufficient financial capital, the process was surprisingly simple. I called my bank and arranged the international wire transfer. I contacted an international moving company specializing in luxury relocations. I booked a first-class flight to Nice with an open return date. Each step gave me more confidence, more of a sense of control over my own life than I'd felt in decades. On Wednesday morning, Oscar arrived with the sales contracts. The developer had agreed to pay $950,000, $50,000 more than initially estimated, with the closing scheduled for the following Friday. As I signed the documents at my small desk, I felt a mix of euphoria and terror that reminded me of when Roberto and I bought our first house. "Are you sure about this decision, Miss Brooks?" Oscar asked as I initialed the last page. "It's a very fast transaction, and I understand the property has sentimental value." "I am absolutely sure," I replied without hesitation. "This house was a home when my husband was alive. Now it's just an expensive building full of people who take me for granted." Over the next few days, while my family continued their normal routines, completely oblivious that their world was about to collapse, I finalized the details of my new life. I wired the money for the penthouse in Monaco. I hired the moving company to pack my personal belongings the same day as the sale closing. I booked a suite at the most elegant hotel in Monte Carlo for my first few weeks while I settled in. On Thursday night, 3 days before the sale closed, Cindy came to my room with a conciliatory smile. "Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation from Sunday. Maybe we were a little harsh suggesting you move out immediately. We could give you more time to find the perfect place." "That's very considerate of you," I replied, carefully folding a blouse into my discreet suitcase. "But I've already made my decision." "Really?" Her eyes lit up with evident relief. "Did you find a place you liked? Maybe we could go see it together, help you with the move." "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," I said, feeling a strange calm. "Everything is arranged." Friday morning arrived like any other normal day for my family. George had breakfast reading sports news on his tablet. Cindy was checking out spa deals on the internet. Kelly was complaining that she didn't have appropriate clothes for a party on Saturday. Michael came downstairs in his pajamas looking for coffee. Elaine was preparing her special organic breakfast, and Charles was snoring audibly from the basement. I had breakfast calmly, observing this family circus with new eyes. In a few hours, it would be just a bitter memory. In a week, I would be waking up in my Monaco penthouse with a view of the Mediterranean, listening to seagulls instead of snoring, smelling the sea breeze instead of Charles's dirty socks. At 10 o'clock, the doorbell rang. It was Oscar accompanied by the developer, a sharp man in his 50s named Ivan, and a public notary to formalize the transaction. The moving trucks also arrived, enormous white vehicles with the logos of an international luxury relocation company. George opened the door, confused. "Good morning. I think there's been a mistake." We weren't expecting any visitors. There's no mistake, I said, appearing behind him with the sales contracts in my hand. Gentlemen, please come in. The unfolding of the following events was like a slow-motion film. First confusion, then disbelief, then panic, and finally despair. My family gathered in the living room like an emergency war council, everyone talking at the same time, all trying to understand how their safe and comfortable world was disintegrating before their eyes. You sold the house without telling us. Cindy screamed in a hysterical voice. How could you do this? We live here. It's our home. It's my house, I reminded her calmly. It has always been my house. You have been guests who stayed much longer than planned. Michael paced the room like a caged animal. Mom, this is crazy. Where are we going to live? Where am I going to stay while I look for a job? Those are decisions you should have made years ago, I replied, signing the last documents while the notary meticulously reviewed everything. George tried to take control of the situation with his usual masculine authority. Lucy, this is completely irrational. You can't make such drastic decisions without consulting the family. We can look for solutions, make financial arrangements. The only financial arrangements I need are the ones I'm making now, I said, accepting the $950,000 check that Ivan extended to me with a professional smile. Kelly began to cry dramatically. Grandma, you can't do this to us. Where am I going to live? How am I going to finish high school? Your parents will have to figure that out, I said, feeling a pang of guilt that I quickly stifled. They're responsible adults, right? The workers from the moving company began to pack my belongings with military efficiency while my family watched in absolute shock. They had arrived with labeled boxes, bubble wrap, and specialized equipment to transport delicate items internationally. Every move was a visual reminder that this wasn't an empty threat or a temporary tantrum, it was a meticulous execution of a carefully designed plan. Internationally. Elaine asked in a trembling voice when she heard one of the workers confirm the delivery address in Monaco. You're leaving the country. I'm going to live my life, I replied, supervising as they carefully packed the photographs of Roberto and me from our honeymoon. Something I should have done years ago. Charles had come down from the basement in his slippers and a t-shirt, still smelling of alcohol from the night before. Lucy, you can't do this. Where am I going to live? I don't have a job. I don't have any money saved. You're 53, Charles, I said without turning to look at him. Maybe it's time you learn to live like an independent adult. George tried a more calculated approach, sitting on the sofa as if we were going to have a civilized negotiation. Lucy, I understand you're upset about the conversation on Sunday. Maybe we didn't express our concerns in the best way, but by selling the house so hastily, you're punishing the whole family for a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I repeated, finally turning to look directly at him. George, you told me verbatim to find my own place because there's just no room for me here anymore. That's exactly what I'm doing. But we didn't mean for you to sell the family home. Cindy protested with real tears streaming down her cheeks. We thought you could rent a nearby apartment, something temporary, until we found a better solution. What better solution? I asked, crossing my arms. You were hoping I would work until I died to keep you all comfortable forever, that I would sacrifice the last years of my life supporting 8 adults who have never shown any real intention of becoming independent. Kelly came closer with that emotional manipulation she had inherited genetically. Grandma, please reconsider this. I promise I'll change, that I'll be more responsible, that I'll get a part-time job. Kelly, you're 17. Your responsibility is to study and prepare for college, I said more gently. The responsibility of supporting you financially is your parents', not mine. Michael had been quiet for several minutes, probably processing the real implications of the situation. He finally exploded with a rage he hadn't shown since he was a teenager. This is unbelievable. After everything we've done for you, you abandon us like this. Everything you've done for me. The question came out as a bitter laugh. Michael, Could you explain to me exactly what you've done for me over the last 15 years? We gave you company. We took care of you after Dad died. We've been your family. You gave me company when you needed money, I interrupted him. You took care of me by letting me work like a slave to support you, and you have only been my family when it was economically convenient. Ivan, the developer, approached discreetly. Ms. Brooks, all the documents are in order. The keys can be transferred whenever you're ready. I'm ready now, I said, taking the house keys from my purse. They were the same keys Roberto had handed me with so much pride 37 years ago when we bought our first house together. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia, but I quickly stifled it. Roberto was dead. This house had become a prison. It was time to be free. Wait! Cindy cried desperately. You can't just hand them over like that. We need time to pack our things, to find somewhere to live. You have until 6 o'clock this evening, Ivan informed them with professional courtesy. After that time, this property will officially be mine, and I will need it vacated to begin demolition on Monday. Demolition. That word hit my family like a nuclear bomb. The house they had considered theirs forever was not only being sold, it was going to be completely destroyed to build a luxury condo development. They're going to tear down the house, Kelly whispered with genuine horror. They're going to build something better, I explained. Modern condos for families who can pay for them with their own money. The moving workers had finished packing my essential belongings. The rest of the furniture and items I was leaving behind. My new life had no room for traces of the past. My penthouse in Monaco would be completely furnished with modern and elegant pieces, without painful memories of decades of family exploitation. Ready to go? The moving supervisor asked me. Completely ready, I replied, taking my handbag and personal bag. Elaine blocked my way to the door, tears in her eyes. Lucy, please. We're sisters. We've been together since we were kids. You can't abandon me like this. Elaine, you abandoned me 15 years ago when you decided my house was a permanent free hotel, I said, gently moving around her. You were never my sister here. You were a guest of my generosity. Charles tried one last emotional appeal. Roberto would be rolling over in his grave, seeing what you're doing to the family he loved so much. That was the last straw for my remaining patience. I turned to him with a fury I had been containing for years. Roberto would be rolling over in his grave, seeing how you all turned me into a slave after his death. I yelled in a voice that echoed through the entire house. Roberto worked himself to death supporting this family, and you have the audacity to use his memory to justify continuing to be parasites. I walked toward the front door, but George intercepted me with one last desperate move. Lucy, if you leave like this, you can never come back. Once you cross that door, there will be no family waiting for you here. I stopped and looked at him directly in the eyes. George, there hasn't been a family here for years. Just people who live for free off my work. And what if you get sick? If you need help, if you feel lonely? Cindy asked in a final attempt at manipulation. Who is going to take care of you in a foreign country? I'll hire professional caregivers with my own money, I replied. It will be cheaper and more efficient than supporting 8 adults who pretend to love me. Michael made one last emotional effort. Mom, I know you're mad, but this is too extreme. We can change. We can be a better family. Michael, you've had decades to change, I said with infinite weariness. The only one who is going to change now is me. I opened the front door and walked out to the street where a black limousine I had hired to take me to the airport was waiting. The uniformed driver took my luggage with discreet professionalism and opened the back door for me. Before getting into the vehicle, I turned one last time to the house that had been my home for 37 years. My 8 family members were standing in the doorway with expressions ranging from disbelief to absolute panic, finally understanding that their source of income and comfort was disappearing forever. Find your own places, I told them in a firm voice. There's just no room for you here anymore. I got into the limousine and instructed the driver to leave. As we drove away, I could see in the rearview mirror how my family remained standing on the curb, watching their safe and comfortable world disappear. For the first time in decades, they would have to solve their own problems without my money, my work, or my sacrifice. The flight to Nice left in 3 hours. In 8 hours, I would be in my new penthouse, breathing Mediterranean air, starting the life that Roberto and I had dreamed of but could never live together. The first-class flight to Nice was the most liberating experience of my 70 years of life. As the plane soared over the city that had been my prison for decades, I felt a gigantic weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since Roberto's death, I didn't have to worry about pending bills, requests for money, or irresponsible adults who depended on my work to survive. The flight attendant served me champagne in a real crystal glass, and I toasted Roberto silently. "My love, I'm finally going to live the dreams we planned together," I whispered, looking at the clouds gilded by the setting sun. "Forgive me for taking so long to find the courage." I landed in Nice at 10 o'clock in the morning local time. The Monaco real estate agent, a dapper gentleman named Yves Dubois, was waiting for me with a discreet sign and a professional smile. The 40-minute drive in a Mercedes to my new penthouse was along the most beautiful Mediterranean coast I had ever seen in my life. Palm trees, luxurious yachts, 5-star hotels, and that impossible blue of the sea that I had dreamed of for years. "Madam Brooks, welcome to your new home," Eve told me as we rode a private elevator to the 18th floor. "I think you'll be very satisfied with your choice." When the elevator doors opened directly into my living room, I almost fainted from excitement. The penthouse was even more spectacular than the photos. Italian marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of the Monte Carlo harbor, designer furniture in cream and gold tones, a fully equipped kitchen with the latest German appliances. But what took my breath away was the terrace. 3,000 square feet of outdoor space with an infinity pool, a vertical garden, an outdoor dining area, and a direct view of multimillion-dollar yachts swaying gently in the crystalline waters. It was the paradise that Roberto and I had imagined in our most ambitious dreams. The building has 24-hour security, concierge service, a spa, a gym, and room service from 5-star restaurants, Eve explained as I walked like a sleepwalker through my new kingdom. Your neighbors include international businessmen, famous artists, and European royalty. Privacy and elegance are guaranteed. That first night, I slept in the king-sized bed with Egyptian silk sheets, listening to the soft sound of the waves against the yachts in the harbor. There was no snoring from Charles, no complaints from Kelly, no arguments between George and Cindy, no out-of-tune guitars from Michael. Just golden silence, absolute peace, and the incredible feeling of finally being home. The first few months were a wonderful adjustment period. I hired a personal assistant named Evelyn, a 50-year-old French woman with experience working for wealthy international residents. She took care of all the practical details: shopping, doctor's appointments, translation when my basic French wasn't enough, and organizing household services. I established routines I had never been able to have in my previous life. I had breakfast on the terrace every morning reading international news. I swam in my private pool as the sun rose over the Mediterranean. I lunched at elegant restaurants in the harbor and spent the afternoons exploring museums, galleries, and botanical gardens in the region. My health improved dramatically. The chronic stress I had carried for decades completely disappeared. My blood pressure normalized. My back pain caused by years of overwork was relieved. And for the first time in decades, I slept 8 full, uninterrupted hours. But the most liberating thing was my absolute financial independence. After buying the penthouse, I had approximately $200,000 left, which I invested conservatively in low-risk European funds. The earnings, combined with my pension converted to euros, gave me more than enough to live comfortably without ever working again. 3 months after I arrived, I received the first call from Cindy. She had gotten my number through international banking contacts, probably by bribing someone to get confidential information. "Mom, please answer," I heard her desperate voice on the voicemail. "We're living in a horrible apartment. Kelly is devastated. George lost his job. We need urgent help. Please forgive us and come home." I deleted the message without responding. The calls continued to come for weeks. Michael crying that he was living at a friend's house because he couldn't afford rent. Elaine begging me to help her with money for an apartment because Charles had disappeared after the sale. George trying to negotiate a family loan to regain their financial stability. I ignored them all completely. 6 months later, the calls stopped. They had apparently accepted that their source of free income had permanently disappeared and that they would have to figure out their lives as independent adults. Part of me was curious about how they were surviving, but most of me felt a profound sense of relief that I was no longer responsible for their decisions. A year after my arrival in Monaco, I celebrated my 72nd birthday with an elegant party on my terrace. I had made friends among my neighbors, sophisticated women from different countries who had chosen Monaco to enjoy their golden years with dignity and luxury. We toasted with Dom Perignon champagne as the sun set over the Mediterranean, and for the first time in decades, I felt genuinely happy. Do you miss your old life? Margaret, a 75-year-old Englishwoman who had sold her company in London to move here after her husband died, asked me. I miss my husband, I answered honestly. But I don't miss being a slave to irresponsible adults who mistook my generosity for an obligation. During my second year in Monaco, I began to write my memoirs, not for publication, but to process decades of decisions that I finally understood had been wrong. Writing about Roberto helped me remember the man he truly was. Generous but not foolish, loving but not exploitable, a family man but not a martyr. Roberto would have been proud of my final decision. He always wanted me to be happy, to enjoy life, not to sacrifice my well-being for people who didn't appreciate it. His untimely death was caused precisely by the stress of supporting a family that took his work for granted. In my third year here, I finally found complete peace. I no longer woke up thinking about pending bills, requests for money, or other people's responsibilities. I woke up planning which museum to visit, which restaurant to try, what trip to take around Europe with my new friends. My money will last the rest of my life because I'm finally spending it on myself. Weekly spa treatments, elegant clothes, cultural trips, dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, original art to decorate my penthouse, everything I had denied myself for decades while funding others' whims. Some nights when I'm on my terrace watching the illuminated yachts sway gently in the harbor, I think about my family. I wonder if Cindy finally learned to live on her own income. If Michael found a stable job. If Kelly understood that real life requires personal effort. Part of me hopes they have grown, that my departure taught them a responsibility that 30 years of comfort failed to instill. But most of me just feels free, finally free. 2 years after I left, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Kelly, now 19 and in college. Unlike the desperate pleas from the others, her letter was different. Dear Grandma, I'm writing this from my dorm room at community college. I'm working part-time at a coffee shop to pay for my books and expenses. Mom and Dad are still struggling, but they're managing. Uncle Michael got a job as a music teacher at an elementary school. He seems happy. Aunt Elaine moved in with a friend, and Uncle Charles, well, nobody's heard from him in a while. I wanted you to know that I understand now. I was a spoiled, entitled brat who never appreciated what you sacrificed for us. Watching Mom and Dad scramble to survive without you, having to work for my own money, learning what real responsibility means, it opened my eyes. I'm not asking you to come back or send money. I'm just asking for your forgiveness. And I want you to know that every time I cash my paycheck, every time I pay a bill with money I earned, I think of you and feel grateful that you loved me enough to teach me this lesson, even though it hurt. I hope you're happy, wherever you are. You deserve it. Love, Kelly. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I went to my desk and wrote a response, the first contact I'd had with my family in 2 years. Dear Kelly, thank you for your letter. It means more than you can imagine. I am happy, truly happy for the first time in decades. I live in Monaco now, in a beautiful penthouse overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. I spend my days doing things your grandfather and I always dreamed of. I wish he were here to see it. I'm proud of you for working and taking responsibility for your life. That's all I ever wanted for any of you, not to abandon you, but to stop enabling you. You don't need my forgiveness, sweetheart. You were a child raised in a dysfunctional system. But I appreciate your apology more than you know. If you ever want to visit, my door is open to you. But come as an independent young woman, not as someone seeking a handout. Come to share experiences, not to take from me. I love you, Kelly. I always have. Sometimes love means saying no. Grandma Lucy. I mailed the letter the next day. This morning, as I swam in my infinity pool with a view of the most beautiful sea in the world, I remembered the exact words Cindy had said to me that fatal night. Find your own place, Lucy. There's just no room for you here anymore. She was right about one thing. There was no room for us together anymore. But the place I found isn't a small apartment for a disposable old lady. It's a golden palace where I can finally live like the Queen Roberto always told me I was. I found my place. And here in my penthouse with a view of Mediterranean paradise, I finally fit perfectly. And for the first time in 50 years, I'm not taking care of anyone but myself.